In this video, we're going to look at the zero product rule. In 1, it says answer the following. In A, it says when any number is multiplied by 0, what is the result? And the result is 0. In B, it says what value of x satisfies the equation 5x is equal to 0? And x would have to equal 0 because 5 can never equal 0. In C, it says what value of x satisfies the equation 5 times x plus 1 is equal to 0. And because 5 can never be 0, we can say that x plus 1 is equal to 0, and then subtract 1 from both sides, and x would equal negative 1. In D, what value or values of x satisfy the equation x times x plus 1 is equal to 0? And now, either x can equal 0 or x plus 1 can equal 0. So the equation is 0 if x is equal to 0 or if x is equal to negative 1. In E, it says what value or values of x satisfy the equation x plus 1 times x minus 2 is equal to 0. And now either x plus 1 can equal 0 would make the equation 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. So this equation is equal to 0 if x is equal to negative 1 or if x is equal to 2. What can you conclude about the values of a and b if a times b is equal to 0? And we can conclude that a is equal to 0 or b is equal to 0. In 2, it says solve each equation using the zero product rule. In A, we have x minus 1 times x plus 5 is equal to 0. So this equation is equal to 0 if x minus 1 is equal to 0 or if x plus 5 is equal to 0. And now we solve both of these and we add 1 to both sides for the first equation and we get x is equal to 1. And for our second equation, we subtract 5 from both sides, and we get x is equal to negative 5. So this equation is equal to 0 if x is equal to 1 or if x is equal to negative 5. In B, we have 4x times x minus 1 is equal to 0. So the equation would equal 0 when 4x is equal to 0 or if x minus 1 is equal to 0. For the first equation, if we were to divide both sides by 4, we would get x is equal to 0. And for our second equation, we would add 1 to both sides, we'd get x is equal to 1. So our equation is equal to 0 when x is equal to 0 or x is equal to 1. In C, we have x plus 1 squared times 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. And the equation is equal to 0 when x plus 1 is equal to 0 or when 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. In the first equation, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. We get x is equal to negative 1. And for the second equation, we're going to add 3 to both sides, gives us 2x is equal to 3, and then divide both sides by 2, and we get x is equal to 3 halves. So our equation is equal to 0 when x is equal to negative 1 or if x is equal to 3 halves. In D, we have 6 times x plus 1 times x minus 5, all divided by x, is equal to 0. Hint, if the fraction is equal to 0, the numerator or the denominator is 0. And that's going to be our numerator equal to 0. Remember, if the denominator is equal to 0, then the fraction would be undefined. And now, our equation would equal 0 when x plus 1 is equal to 0, or when x minus 5 is equal to 0. In the first equation, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. We get x is equal to negative 1. In the second equation, we'll add 5 to both sides, and we get x is equal to 5. So our equation is equal to 0 when x is equal to negative 1 or when x is equal to 5. And that's the video on the zero product rule.